"How long has it been since we arrived?" Ewan asked. "About 4 hours, sir. I'm terribly sorry if the noise woke you." "Think nothing of it. What's happening over there?" He pointed to the crowd in the corner. "Oh, nothing you'd find important, sir," Bernard brushed off, wiping down the counter as he spoke. "Miss Deirdre's playing a young scamp she fleeced last week. He's been demanding they play again and is betting 100 Norries against her." "Norries? Oh, pardon me, sir. Norries are the black chips used as gambling currency here. The masters let us use them amongst ourselves to trade, a bit of cloth for a new basket, that sort." "I see," Ewan said, taking a drink of his beer and cringing a little. It was certainly intended for intoxication rather than casual enjoyment. "Who does the crowd favor?" "Oh, well, they're a fickle lot. They don't like Peter, the young scamp, but they like to see fortunes change hands." "Does Miss Deirdre frequently win?" "Oh, yes, sir," Bernard said proudly. "She's been coming here a good many years now and has learned all the tricks. And she hasn't been moved or sold, so she's gotten a good footing in this place." "Who are the primary curé in this town?" "That would be Lord and Lady Freehand. Their plantation provides most of the work for this town. I myself belong to—" Bernard suddenly stopped, causing Ewan to look away from the crowd and back toward him. His acquaintance had the strangest look on his face, a mix of confusion, humiliation, and anger. A moment later he recollected himself and said briskly, "I'm sorry, sir, I have much work to do," and shuffled away. Ewan sighed and took another sip of beer. Cringing again, he stood up and went to observe the game. At the circular wooden table sat the young boy, Peter, who was perhaps 16 years old. His freckled face was sour as he stared at the cards in his hands. Finally he took one and laid it down along the line of open-faced cards. On it was a bird with long red feathers. Ewan knew nothing of the game, but he could tell from the disapproving murmurs that the choice was weak. The person at whom Peter's glare was directed was hidden from Ewan, but he caught sight of a feminine hand as it took a new card and flipped it upwards on the table, revealing a dog with sharp teeth and red eyes. The moment the card became visible, the bystanders erupted in a fury of unintelligible cheers. Peter, however, didn't look upset. In fact, Ewan saw he could barely suppress his excitement while waiting for the noise to die down. When it did, he laid down a card that had on it a bear of sorts, with grey fur and claws. The crowd gasped at the sudden change in fortunes. "I've won!" he cried, throwing his remaining cards on the table and looking smugly at the crowd. However, his opponent cleared her throat, directing Peter to look back down. Beside the bear was a card with a creature with wings and a tail covered in spikes. Its eyes were red, and a stream of fire shot out of its mouth. All at once cheers erupted around the players. The winner pulled the pile of black chips toward herself, and Peter stood up, a look of murderous rage on his face. His opponent also stood, allowing Ewan to get a first glimpse of her. Though her back was toward him, he saw she was of medium height and had long dark hair reaching to her lower back. She wore a faded green dress and an old satchel into which she began pouring her winnings. She said something to her defeated opponent, swallowed the rest of her beer, and began walking to the door. The slaves returned to their own games, and Ewan himself also headed back to the bar, which prevented him from seeing another boy whisper something in Peter's ear. He did, however, hear Peter shout the words, "Lying hussy!" and turned around in time to see Deirdre grabbed ruthlessly by the neck and thrown onto the table. Ewan rushed over, pushing people aside as he went. Before he reached them, Deirdre simultaneously kicked her attacker in the groin, pulled at his hand, and rolled off the table. The combination of movements allowed her to get free of him, and she crashed onto the floor, gasping for breath. Peter kicked her in the ribs, but before he could do more damage, he was floored by Ewan with one hit. Peter's companion rushed upon Ewan from behind, but the young prince of the curé's reflexes were faster, and he flipped him over his back and down upon the floor. Both men lay there, groaning and seemingly unwilling to try again. Ewan turned his attention to Deirdre, who was now sitting up and staring in surprise at her savior. "Are you all right, miss?" he asked, holding out his hands to help her. Reaching for them and standing up shakily, she nodded. "You're nothing if not efficient," she said, looking down at her assailants. Her speech was slurred and her dark eyes bleary, and when she tried to step sideways, she nearly tripped. "Would you like to sit down?" he asked, still holding one of her hands. "No, I'm all right," she insisted. "Who are you?" "Sir!" Bernard rushed up and grabbed Deirdre's arm, pulling her away from Ewan. "Don't worry, I'll see to her." "It's no trouble, really," Ewan promised. "I think she should go to bed. She's more than a little intoxicated." Deirdre looked wrathfully at him, saying, "I'll thank you not to speak of me as if I'm not here." "Deirdre, you need to go home," Bernard ordered. "Get along with you." "She can't walk home like this," Ewan argued. "Let me help her." "No," Bernard and Deirdre said at the same time. "My mistress won't be coming for me tonight," Deirdre said. "I'll just rest a little in the attic, Bernard." "That won't be possible now, miss," Bernard said, vastly uncomfortable. Suddenly shouting broke out in the street. All movement in the tavern stopped as everyone listened. Several voices were yelling, "Slaves to quarters!" Then, as if something internal was triggered in all of them, slaves began exiting. You don't want them mistaking you for one of their slaves again, Miss Deirdre, Bernard said. Though he was unwilling to leave her with Ewan, he knew he had little choice. You'd better go upstairs for a little while. Absolutely, Ewan agreed. When he saw that Bernard still looked uneasy about leaving Deirdre alone with him, he added, I'll sit with her at the top of the stairs. Bernard's relief showed he understood what Ewan was saying. Thank you, my lord. Hurry now. I don't even know your name, she said with slow deliberation when they were seated at the top of the stairs. I'm Ewan. And you? You stopped Peter from bashing my chest, didn't you? That's an interesting way of putting it. But yes, I knocked him over, he answered, rubbing his sore knuckles. He deserved it, she said in a voice thick with drunkenness. I wasn't cheating. Why did he think you were? I don't know. Maybe his friend saw the way I hid my cards. What do you mean? He has his friends stand behind me and keep track of what cards I play. But she paused dramatically, holding her finger in the air. I put little covers on them so it just looks like I play them. Then I whip out the real card later and win again. Ewan nodded slowly, not completely understanding. By the way, I suppose I should thank you. Although the intervention wasn't all that necessary. They could have killed you, you know. No, she said, shaking her head forcefully. Worst they would have done was break my ribs. They've broken your ribs? Left me in bed for 5 months. Most boring 5 months of my life, by the way. Why do you play with him if he takes losing so poorly? Ewan asked. Because he keeps asking. And if I don't, he puts it about that I don't know how to. I beat him to show him up. And end up with broken ribs. But that only happened once, Deirdre said. It seems to me that once should have been enough. They heard the doors of the tavern suddenly thrown open. Any drunken stragglers, Bernard? Acuris asked. No, none tonight, my lord, Bernard answered. Will you be having a draught? 6 glasses, a different Curus answered. Ugh, do you have anything besides this awful stuff? A Cura with a grating voice asked a few moments later. Calm down, Camille, another Cura said. Frian won't spend more on this place than he has to. It isn't as if it would be appreciated if he did, the second Cura said. This place is vile and filthy, another Cura said. How anyone can enjoy themselves in a hole like this is beyond me. They're mostly intoxicated when they're here, Marcus, the first Curus reminded him. Base pleasures for a base race, Camille spat. I'm going to get something more palatable. What followed were more footsteps in the door opening and shutting. I hope Geoffrey catches her trying to, the other Cura said. She's the worst hire since Clemson. He won't fire her, the second Cura said. She's just like him. You should have seen her enthusiasm in beating one of the little brats the other day. The thing could barely walk. You didn't hear what happened afterward, though? The first Curus asked. It died an hour later. Friand was furious. The only reason she got out of it was Geoffrey said it was sick anyway. The mother just carried it away, Marcus said. That's not how it normally is. Usually they wail like animals. Once I had to kill one because of that. They're all too passionate, the first Curus answered in a bored voice. They get distracted by their own emotions. That's how they lost their authority in the first place. Bernard, fill me up. Get me some temio leaves, Bernard, the Cura ordered. Watch yourself, my girl, the first Curus said. I won't be carrying you when you're floating out of your boots. That stuff isn't even that strong, Marcus interrupted. Fresh off the stem like that? Once I met a man who had it into a tonic and drank it by the gallon. I had one with him and didn't wake up for 2 days. Suddenly the door of the tavern opened again, and a new voice said, Geoffrey's calling for a report. The curé groaned, but obeyed. Ewan didn't notice until they were gone that Deirdre was leaning against him, snoring softly. Scooping her up in his arms, he carried her down the steps. Thank you, Bernard said, holding out his arms. I can take her now. She'll likely be in a lot of pain tomorrow, Ewan said as he relinquished her. She has bruises on her neck already. Oh, don't concern yourself with that, my lord. She's seen a lot worse brawls, and her mistress will take care of her. She will take care of her? Oh, Bernard stopped. Well, Deirdre's owner is kinder than most. More like yourself, my lord. Ah, I see. She's fortunate, then. Very, sir, Bernard agreed. I'm locking up now, but I'll be back at dawn. Thank you. Good night. Sleep was a while in coming for the prince, however. There was a certain contentment in knowing he had at least a slight lead to go on, but he felt troubled when he considered Deirdre, heavily intoxicated, with bruises on her neck as large as plums. Incognito or not, these hardly appeared to be the proper circumstances in which to find the missing Neath princess. Thank you for listening to Part 2 of Chapter 1 of Slaves and Exiles by Margaret Gaffney, published by All Things That Matter Press, all rights reserved. To find this title, check out Amazon.com.